You can stay in the courtroom if you... All right. All right, that's the scene today inside of a Sedgwick County courtroom as a fight breaks out during the sentencing of a man.
So, 6 people have been charged after a fight broke out inside a courtroom in the United States of America. But before we get into the details of this, thanks for supporting my channel. But just in case you are watching and you haven't subscribed, you know what to do. Our analytics show us that most of our viewers have not subscribed, and this is really harming my channel. Please subscribe, and in return, go to the comment section and type subscribed, and I'll respond and make sure that I continue giving you even better content than what you are watching. I digress. Now to the case at hand. As at the 8th of April, things would get out of hand in a courtroom in the Sedgwick County of the United States of America. And at this particular court session, it had to do with a 19-year-old called TrenJ'vious Hutton. And he, at the time of this session, was faced with sentencing for the 2022 shooting death of a 14-year-old guy by name TrenJ'vious Hutton. Now, this unfortunate incident occurred at the town East Square Mall in 2022. Now, I've always talked about the fact that it's very important that people get to understand that human life is valuable and it's irreplaceable. I appreciate that sometimes conflicts may come up, although it's best to avoid it if it's possible, but sometimes it's almost as though some conflicts are inevitable. But even in that, I think it's important people are brought up to learn and appreciate that the fact that a conflict has unfortunately erupted does not mean it shouldn't be de-escalated. But unfortunately, on this particular incident in 2022 between TrenJ'vious Hutton and TrenJ'vious Hutton at this mall, it would turn fatal, and unfortunately this 14-year-old TrenJ'vious Hutton lost his life as a result. He passed on at the scene despite the life-saving efforts that paramedics tried to administer. And per this, the perpetrator at the time, TrenJ'vious Hutton, was then arrested. And at the time, he was just 16 years old. But he was actually being tried in court as an adult because of the severity of the crime. Obviously, a life had been lost. Now, Robinson later pled no contest to the second-degree murder, attempted second-degree murder, and aggravated battery charges that were leveled against him. And he was sentenced to a little over 21 years in prison. So that is what was transpiring as at the 8th of April 2025. The incident had actually happened in 2022, and now Robinson was being sentenced in 2025. And as is very typical of court hearings, particularly on incidents like this, you would have both families represented in the courtroom. So there's the family of the victim, and then there's the family of the culprit. Now, mostly when these things are transpiring, if you've ever witnessed this in a courtroom, you would appreciate that there's an air of emotion, empathy, pain, sadness, sorrow, anger, grief, all mixed together, you know. It's like a buffet of feelings. And this time around, it would go beyond that, because tensions began to escalate when the victim's mother, called Jeanette Dees, gave an emotional victim impact statement. Now, in case you don't know what a victim impact statement is, let me just break it down a bit. Basically, a victim impact statement is a statement given by people who have close ties to the victim of an incident. Usually it happens when somebody is deceased or there's a fatality in an incident. So the close ties of that victim usually come to talk about how that has impacted them, how the loss of that victim has impacted them. And that is exactly what the mother of the victim came to do in this case. And in doing that, she was speaking directly to the accused, TrenJ'vious, and she accused him of showing no remorse, despite the fact that he had actually taken her son from her. She went on to talk about the fact that he had recorded multiple rap songs from jail that referenced the fatal incident, including one song that this culprit actually titled as Tubi Attack. Bear in mind, Tubi is the nickname of the victim, the 14-year-old victim. And his mom has to sit and hear such songs being played about the unaliving of her son. And the song was recorded by the person who unalived her son. Sometimes I always say there are certain lines you don't cross because it takes things overboard, it burns certain bridges, and you may never be able to come back from it, and you may actually end up triggering someone's worst response. And it will culminate into that at a point during this case, because as this victim impact statement was going on and the mom of the victim was talking about this rap song that this culprit had recorded detailing out how he unalived her son, he went on to talk about the fact that this culprit in doing so didn't even care, and he didn't listen to his lawyer, and he was wasting everybody's time. And you can appreciate her anger in what she's saying. And she went on to talk about the fact that this culprit, TrenJ'vious, said in the interrogation part that he put himself in the fight and that he wasn't in the fight and he jumped in the fight. And he was referring to what had happened between the culprit and her 14-year-old son. There's nothing more painful than somebody unaliving someone and flexing about what they've done in the face of the family of their victim. It raises a lot of tension. And sometimes, in as much as you may not condone the reaction that comes from such provocation, on a certain level, some may argue that it is understandable. So, right after the victim's mom, Jeanette, had spoken, the courtroom erupted. People started shouting, and both families started yelling at each other, with some people also standing up and trying to sort of extend themselves beyond the yelling. At this point, deputies and police there began escorting some individuals out. So you would expect that, then this is where the situation is actually brought under control. But guess what? You are wrong, because it was at this point that the situation would quickly turn physical when someone threw a punch. And out of that, there was a 30-second brawl or fight that followed, with multiple people getting involved as the police tried to break it up and in the process tried to protect a baby who was actually in a baby car seat just a few meters nearby. So, let me break this down further. I told you about the victim impact statement. And imagine this happened in 2022. So imagine what has been going on with the victim's family, having to deal with it from 2022, 2023, 2024, right down to 2025, only to come to court and have to face the suspected offender in the demise of their 14-year-old child and relative. It takes a lot of restraint not to react. Not to talk of the fact that the situation starts to escalate and some relatives of the accused have the effrontery to yell at them. Out of pain and grief, crazy things can come. And sometimes, even though they are in court, getting justice, arguably, deep down, some people, especially those who are at the loss of a loved one due to an incident or a crime, sometimes feel that no amount of justice from the court can restore them whole, because no amount of justice or verdict from the court can bring back their dead loved one. So, in a way, arguably, sometimes some people are at the court, and although they are looking for a guilty verdict for the suspect or the offender, deep down, that guilty verdict, even if they get it, cannot heal their pain, does not quench their thirst for vengeance, and does not give them peace. So, it is best things are conducted in a harmonious manner, because any little trigger can set something off. And it did set something off in this case. It led to a 30-minute brawl. Now, in the process, after the brawl was diffused, some individuals were removed from the courtroom, while others also remained for the rest of the hearing. Of course, court business will still continue, because I've always talked about what occurs when emotions meet the law. Emotions would have to make way for the law. And if you are a party to either side of the case, you wouldn't find anything funny about it. Sometimes you sit back and look at how certain cases play out. And like I said, you may not condone certain reactions and actions, but if you put it into the context of the natural instinct of a human being, you begin to understand why they will do certain things. And I'll lend that to this issue, because on a certain level, you would understand why this brawl will erupt, especially with regards to the aggression from the victim's family. They've lost someone, and even a guilty verdict seems not to possibly be enough for them. Now, following from this incident, the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office then reviewed the CCTV video footage in an effort to determine who was involved. Because bear in mind, like I told you, when emotions meet the law, emotions have to make way for the law to work. And in this case, although the brawl and the fight had happened and some people would feel they are justified to be aggressive, some may even try to argue self-defense in whatever form, bear in mind, this is actually a crime. Getting into fisticuffs is a crime. Not to talk of the fact that you are doing it inside a courtroom. That even elevates the crime further, if I'm right. So after all was said and done and the brawl was diffused, they were separated, some people were ushered out, then the law still continued, the trial continued, and the footage was also obtained and reviewed for the people who will be found culpable to also be put to process and be faced the law. And that was what happened. And as a result of reviewing that footage and the incident, charges have subsequently been filed against 5 individuals. Now, amongst other charges, facing misdemeanor disorderly conduct charges are these people. First of all, 48-year-old Jeanette Dees. Bear in mind, Jeanette Dees is the mother of the victim, the deceased 14-year-old. So you see what I was saying, the pain. And it's very, very hurtful, because in her spirit, in her heart, in her mind, she's grieving. And even to the point that this guy didn't just end the life of her 14-year-old son. He went on to make a rap song about it and titled it specifically with the nickname of her son, rapping, and he was rapping about how he unalived him, and she has to hear this being played. Imagine this is the favorite song of your neighbor. That's so messed up. And I'm not surprised she'll be one of the people engaged in this fisticuff. So she has been charged, and at least 4 of her adult children. And they are 33-year-old Derek Eugene Parker Jr., 24-year-old TrenJ'vious Hutton, 21-year-old TrenJ'vious Hutton, and 18-year-old TrenJ'vious Hutton, and a 16-year-old male. So I told you, the family of the victim. The pain and anger and grief just took over. So it's like the mom of the victim and the brothers of the victim are all culpable. We are in a cold world, arguably, in these times, where some people instill pain, hurt, that is irreconcilable, that is unable to heal, and they go on to add more to it. And sometimes, by the dispensation of how certain things currently are structured, you are expected to still take it and control yourself. Sometimes it's easier said than done. And in this case, the family of the victim couldn't just sit by and let the law work. But 5 of these people have been charged. The mom of the victim and 4 of the people of his brothers have been charged. They are due back the last time as at 29th of May 2025. But what do you think about this? Do you agree with what happened? If you were in a position to dictate what the law should be, would you say they should be let off and not be charged? Given the fact that there's actually a man standing trial and having been sentenced for unaliving their family member, and once that has been established, it's expected their pain possibly drove them to this, so they should be excused. Would you want to give them that leeway if you had the power? Because that's what some people are arguing. I don't know what your view is. I would want to see your views in the comment section. But like I said, for me, when emotions meet the law, emotions definitely would always have to make way for the law. And that is what is happening. RIP to the victim. My condolences to his family. It's unfortunate that the mom and the brothers of the victim are going to also face legal charges. But I'm sure within themselves, they may be happy that at least they were able to let some of the rage out, and they might think it's worth it. There's actually one case on my channel where someone went after the suspect himself. You know, the dad of the victim, who in this case was a girl, went after the suspect whilst the suspect was in court, and the suspect then ran away, you know, and the suspect's family came in. These are things that turn families upside down. Sometimes we get to watch them in videos like mine, and you may not appreciate its impact fully, but I tell you, it's deep and it's heavy. And these are the normal lives of some people due to the callous actions of others. As I've been advising of late, let's try to learn emotional intelligence. Let's try to teach our kids how to de-escalate things. Maybe if some of these things are taught more frequently and taught better and imbibed more by the younger generation, you wouldn't have 16-year-olds pulling out handguns and unaliving 14-year-olds over a dispute at a mall. It's so unfortunate. And sometimes these guys have such bright futures, but they are cut short by some of these crazy and stupid reactions. And to the family of the culprit, in as much as he has been determined guilty, you can't also not have compassion for his family, because they are also technically losing a loved one to prison. Let's learn from this, share this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe out there.